Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Adobe XD Daily Creative Challenge. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe, and it's great to see all of you here this, what day is it? Wednesday afternoon. If you are tuning in live here on Behance, let me know who you are and where you're tuning in from. We've already got Sam and Monica and Andrew who just wrapped up not only the 2-hour stream, but also a half an hour Illustrator Daily Challenge. Andrew, you are a beast. Great stuff, by the way. Cornell and Michelle and Anna. And thankfully, it looks like YouTube is cooperating. It was glitching really hard right before this stream started, but I'm here. I have made it. Hey, Laura and Tia and everyone else. All right, so day number 7, I believe, of the Daily XD, whatever words are. Adobe XD Daily Creative Challenge, that's the one. Hey Amna, welcome everyone. All right, I'm gonna hop over to my screen. Let's take a look at what we're gonna be doing today. So here's the landing page, behance.net/challenge/XD. Head over here, you get all the information you need about these challenges. This one only has 3 days left. Today, tomorrow, and then Friday. But next week, I believe it's Peter Del Tondo coming up. So there's gonna be some really good stuff, and I'll be back in just a few weeks, but we have some amazing hosts that take part in these challenges, including the amazing Andrew, who is in the chat, I believe. He may have just chatted something and then run away. I see you, Andrew. All right, so if you haven't hit that big blue register button at the top, hit the big blue register button so you're notified when new challenges come out. Every single day you're gonna receive one of those challenges, at least Monday to Friday, except the first Monday. Makes sense, right? The first Monday is more of an intro stream, and you're going to see that in just a few days with Peter. You can join us in our Discord community chat, and Discord, I believe, let me open up right over here, and here we go. We have about 45,000 members in Discord. 45,000, that's a lot of people. So you can get information about the daily challenges, you can get inspired, see what's new in Adobe XD, and there was a new update that just came out yesterday? I've lost track of days. I don't know what day it is. Tuesday, yesterday, it came out, XD 29, and we're working on some really big things behind the scenes that I can't wait to share with all of you. If you have questions or you want to share tips and tricks, you can do that. And more importantly, you can hop into the current challenge channel right here, and you can share the work of your challenges. And there's a lot of amazing people in here sharing their stuff. We also have some amazing mentors, including Alexis, Alize, Joss, Matt, Melody, Peter, Tim, Marissa. Great people in there. So hop into Discord. Sam just posted the link, and it's a good time. All right, so very quick recap. Last week, we started this process with a sign-in screen using components. We moved on to the navigation bar using component states, social feed, and we incorporated anchor links into that, search and discovery using plugins, a profile settings using overlays. We also explored how that can be done using components. Yesterday, we built out the messaging experience using content-aware layout. I did run into some problems with content-aware layout yesterday. That was all my fault. I didn't set up the constraints properly, so I apologize for that. Today will be a little bit more smooth, I hope. And today, we're gonna be tackling the floating action button that you might see on many applications, including Twitter, Lightroom, so on and so forth. All right, and if you do follow me and you've seen many of my streams, you've probably seen me create one of these floating action buttons before. I love these things, but it allows you to, store a bunch of information inside of a tiny button. And with components and states and auto animate, you can incorporate this onto a single artboard. So here we go. We're gonna hop over to Adobe XD. Here is where we left off yesterday. And as I always mention, if you haven't been participating from day number 1, you can always grab the starter file, which does contain all of this information, so you can get going right away on today's challenge. All right, here we go. So we have our sign-in screen. We have our feed with our stories at the top, which we use plugins for. We have our search and discovery. We have our messaging. And we have our overlay menu right over here. Now, for the actual action button, here's what we're going to do. And by the way, the acronym is FAB, but it also stands for floating action button. So you can use those interchangeably. FAB or FAB is a little bit easier to say, a little condensed. All right, here's what we're gonna do. We're going to design this on this screen here, but as you'll see shortly, you can very easily transfer it, copy and paste it onto any of the other screens once it's been turned into a component. So I'm going to grab my ellipse tool from the tools bar to the left, and I'm simply going to draw one out. Just like this. I'm going to hold down my shift key to constrain that to a perfect circle, and I can position it somewhere right about here. It's okay if it doesn't line up with the guides completely, because in general, you want your floating action buttons to not be super obstructive, right? So if we were to put it right about here, it's going to kind of block things. So we'll put it about here, kind of hanging off to the side, and we're going to take a look at the preview in just a second. In terms of the color, usually you see them blue because that's a pretty actionable color, and you can definitely do that. You can also, if you want, pull in the pink that we've been using, and that's not bad because it signifies action within this specific application. The users probably understand that pink, some of the buttons were pink, so this is probably a button as well. Let's take a look at how this is looking in terms of the size. It's not too bad. I'm going to probably actually grab it and move it down just a little bit and maybe increase the size just a touch. We want users to really see this, right? And I'm going to position it right about there. Again, you can definitely break with the guides if you need to. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and close this preview window. Now the first thing we might want, I'm going to hide my guides, Command and Control, semicolon. The first thing we might want is some sort of an icon to actually add something. And you can imagine if it's a social media app, you might want to add maybe a text post, a photo post, maybe you can go live from this application, just like I'm doing right now. So for that, we can either use the text tool to type out a plus, or what we can do is we can grab the line tool, draw one out just like this, right? We can increase the size quite a bit, set the border to white, and round out the caps. Maybe I'll increase the size just a little bit more to about 5, right? So that's about 22 pixels, and we can either duplicate it or we can drag out another one that's the same size. It's completely up to you. Round out those caps and make sure it's centered. Beautiful. So now we have a little bit of a plus button going on. Things are starting to take shape. I'm going to hop over to my layers panel and just make sure to group these, Command and Control G, and I'm going to call this Add. There we go. All right, we have our add button looking pretty good. But of course, once someone presses that button, we want additional ones to kind of fly out of it. So there's a few things we can do. One, we're going to start by creating those icons. So I'm going to duplicate this upwards, and we're going to have approximately 3 additional ones, right? And this one, I'm going to actually start by removing these. There we go. And we're going to duplicate another one. I'm not too concerned about the spacing just yet because we will work on that in a moment. I'm just kind of putting these here just so we can design what they're going to all look like. And this one, let's say, is going to be a text post. This one up here is going to be a photo post. And this one might be live, right? Now, inside of each of these, and they're still groups, we need some icons. Now, of course, again, you can design your own icons. You can grab from icon libraries. I'm going to go to the plugins, the plugin that we've been using, Icons for Design. I love this plugin. I'm going to go ahead and select that. It does give you access to open source icons, so you can definitely use them in your project. So for this one, I'm going to type out pencil, for example, and the awesome pencil is pretty awesome. And I'm going to make this a little bit smaller, just like that. I can sample the white, or of course you can use your color picker, and there we go, we have a pencil. Now for this one over here, I'm going to, let's say, type out camera, and we have a nice retro camera here, also part of the awesome library. Make that a little bit smaller. We'll go ahead and type or sample the white. And finally, this one over here might be some sort of a live icon, right? So you can go live or you can make a quick broadcast or whatever it might be, like a podcast, for example. And Awesome to the Rescue, again, has a great icon I can use. All right, there we go. So we essentially have all of our icons created. We have live, we have camera, we have our pencil for our text posts. And now what we need to do is we need to create the initial state, what it's going to look like when all of these icons are hidden. Now, what we can do, one thing we can do, is we can grab all of these icons. I'm going to move the add icon above, right up here. We can grab all of these and kind of move them underneath if we wanted to. So we can, move one there, one down here, and one over here, right? but we may want to get a little bit fancy with this, and I love getting fancy with my designs. So I'm actually going to create a mask first. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to grab the rectangle from the left in the tools bar, and I'm going to draw out a rectangle across all the information, right? I'm going to leave a little bit of breathing room at the top, just in case we want to utilize a snap. So a snap will go a little bit higher and then it'll kind of settle into place, right? So we have that. I'm going to round out the corners, and this we're going to be using for the mask. So here's how masks work. I'm going to name this mask in my layers panel. You don't have to name it that. I just like keeping it simple and to the point. So what you want to do is you want to place the object that you're going to be using for the mask on top of all the other ones. So in that case, we have our mask, and I'm going to hold down my shift key and click on the last object, just like that, right? So now I have the mask selected and all the icons underneath it. And once that's done, under the object menu, you're going to go mask with shape. If you are on Windows, you would right click on one of the elements on your canvas and you'll have the mask with shape option there. So I'm going to do that, and it's going to take all the objects underneath that layer at the top and hide them. Well, in this case, it's going to put them inside of it, and anything outside of that mask is going to be hidden. And that's the key, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start grabbing these icons and move them outside of the mask below the plus button. Someone's asking about my masterclass. I'm going to be having a masterclass on Friday. Typically, they are every Friday at noon Pacific time, and I'll definitely be having one this Friday. Now, we have them outside of the mask, right? And if I click off of the mask, it hides them, just like what we want. But maybe to kind of give the impression that these icons are coming in at different speeds, they're kind of staggered, what we can do is we can actually select them all and just space them out a touch, just like this. And you'll see once the animation takes place, it'll kind of give that impression, which is really fun, right? All right, so we have our initial state created, but what we need to do is turn this into a component, and that will allow us to create an additional state and animate between both of them. Good stuff, right? All right, here's what we're gonna do. Over here to the right, we're gonna press the plus button beside component, just like that. That's gonna create our default state. And we already went ahead and created that or designed that default state, so we don't have to do anything else unless you wanna make a few tweaks. However, we can now press that same plus button and create a new state. Of course, you can also create a hover state, but because we're designing for a mobile device, specifically a phone, hover doesn't really apply unless you're designing for one of the new iPads with the keyboards, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and press new state, and we're gonna call this expanded, just like that. Beautiful. So now that the new state has been created and it's active, which is indicated by the blue background, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start moving things into place. So I'm gonna dive into my component, I'm gonna dive into the mask, then I'm gonna start selecting all these elements. So I'm gonna just move the pencil up here. I'm gonna move the camera, and you're noticing my smart padding is helping me out throughout this process. And I'm gonna move this live icon up here as well. And there we go. Again, I do want a little bit of breathing room at the top, because if I do decide to use snap, we're gonna try out ease in and out and snap. But if I do go with snap, if you have this icon pushed right up to the edge, you're gonna cut out a little bit off when it does the little snap. Maybe I'll show you that if we have time. But a little bit of breathing room, always good. All right. Now, another thing we might want to do, because we've already pressed the plus button, we might want to indicate to users that pressing it again will close it. And of course, right now, it doesn't really tell users that. So what I can do is I can dive in here, I can select both of these and just rotate it, just like that. Or if I want to be really fancy, I can rotate it a lot. About 225 degrees up at the top here. In the properties inspector, you can put an exact value up there if you wanted to. And maybe I'll also grab the background layer and just reduce the opacity a little bit, right? Maybe 55% looks pretty good. All right, so we've gone ahead and created our two states. We have our default state, which is just the add button and all the other icons that are hidden. And we have our expanded state where all the icons fly up, the add button turns into a close button, and the opacity is decreased slightly. Now the big question is, how do we make this thing work? Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna hop into prototype mode. And with our default state active, we're gonna select the element that we want a user to tap on. Now, because we have that big mask at the top, it's automatically going to select this entire thing. And we may not necessarily want that because if a user taps in this area here, we don't want it to activate the Fab button. So what's nice about component states is you can select individual objects within it, and you can use that to activate additional states. So I'm going to go ahead and select the Add button, and you can see I have that selected in my Layers panel right here. And we have this blue handle over to the left. That's the right. We have a blue handle over to the right. Now, if you were doing artboard to artboard transitions, you would grab the handle and drag it to another artboard. Now, because we want to animate between two different states within that component, we're simply going to click on it. And it's going to sprout out this very cute blue wire. And over to the right within the Properties Inspector, we will be allowed to choose which state we want to go to. Again, if you want to go to a different artboard, you can select that here or drag the handle, but we do want to transition to a different state. So I'll go ahead and select the expanded state. It's going to automatically default to auto animate, which is exactly what we want. Of course, if you wanted it to just transition to it, you can select transition, right? But auto animate is what we want. Now, in terms of the easing options, again, we might go with snap, but let's start with ease in and out. And duration, we want to keep it fairly quick. We don't want it like 2 seconds because we don't want users to be waiting for 2 seconds just to add a post, right? So 0.6 seconds might work. We may actually want to drop that to about 0.4 seconds. We will see. But that's all about, it's the cool thing about testing. So once that's done, we're going to go ahead and press the play button right here at the top. And we have our Fab menu, and I can simply click on it, and it slides out. Let's do that one more time. Let's zoom in here so we can see what's going on, right? That's not bad. And you can kind of see, because we staggered those icons, they kind of come in at different speeds. It appears that way, right? Now, let me go ahead and see what 0.4 seconds looks like. That feels a little bit better. And I kind of like the add button rotating a little bit more than just 15 degrees or whatever it might be, right? So that looks pretty good. Let's also go for snap. Let's see what that looks like. Ooh, that's kind of fun. Let me do that one more time and zoom in, right? Watch closely. Whoop. Right? That's kind of fun. Now, here's what I was talking about with the mask. If we were to have the mask, right? Let me go back to my design. What's the shortcut for playing a preview, Cornell's asking. So on the Mac, it is Command Return, and on Windows, it might be the same. It might be Control Return instead of Command. So here's what I was telling you, right? If I go into my default state, and I make the mask, let me hop in here, double click, I'm going to select the mask. If I were to make the mask just like this, right? So it kind of hugs that icon. Now it looks like I messed up one of the icons, don't worry about that. But then if I go ahead and press play, you're going to notice it gets cut off a little bit at the top. So that's, again, why you want to leave a little bit of breathing room at the top so that when the snap takes place, it kind of settles there, right? Now, if I were to go to prototype mode one more time, and maybe instead of 0.4 seconds, let's do 2 seconds. Again, you don't want to do this in an actual real world environment, but just to show you what's happening, let's do 2 seconds, right? And they're all coming in. See, there was a snap, right? And it cuts it off at the top. Again, you don't want that. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to just enlarge that mask just like that to give a little bit more breathing room. Again, I'm going to bump this up to 2 seconds so we can see what's happening, right? And let me move my zoom a little bit just so you can see. And with that breathing room, you don't have that weird cutoff, right? And Usman is saying, can you add we can add shadow to give depth? Yes, you can definitely do that. You can add a shadow behind the plus button. However, I'm getting to something. Here's another cool thing about component states is you don't necessarily have to have the same elements in both states. Are you getting it? I'm kind of getting where I'm going with this? So let me actually change this back to 0.6 seconds because 2 seconds is way too long. All right. Now, you might notice if I play this and press the add button, we have these icons here. And in some cases, you can definitely see the icons against the white background. However, maybe if this user, for example, you have a very bright, fancy photo, maybe it has a lot of pink in it, these icons here would definitely get lost in that image, right? You don't want that. So here's what we can do. Back in design mode, I'm going to hop into my expanded state, and I may want some sort of an overlay to add a little bit of contrast or a separation between the social feed in the background and the icons that have come up. So this is what we're going to do. Inside of the component, just like this, you want to make sure to not go into the mask, because that will constrain it to that little rounded rectangle that we created. So you want to go right above the mask. We're going to grab a rectangle and we're going to draw one out just like this. And I'm going to make sure it aligns with the navigation bar at the bottom, and it looks like it mostly does. And I want to make sure it also aligns with the header at the top. And it does. Beautiful. Now, of course, we don't want to leave it up here because it's going to be very difficult to see it. I'm going to name this overlay. Now, what I can do is I can simply move it back. I can use my Command or Control and then the left square bracket key to move it behind those icons. You can also right-click right over here, and you can bring forward, bring to front, send backwards, send to back, whatever you might want. So you can leave it at this, or if you want to get a little bit fancy, you can drop the opacity a little bit, right? You can do that, or you can add a background blur. Now, background blurs are a little bit tricky to work with, but in this case, it would probably work. I can drop this a little bit. I'm not loving it completely. I think for this example, just dropping the opacity a little bit will definitely give us that separation, even if we had a very colorful image in the background. So it's about, 85%, just like that. You can also use the number keys on your keyboard to enter a value as well. So we have that set up, and again, you don't have to have this particular element in your initial state for this to work. So if I go back to my default state, I can go ahead and press play, and I can tap on the plus button. There we go. And of course I need a way back, right? So here's where we can go into our expanded state and wire up the add button, just like this, just like we did before. We're going to click on the blue handle, and we're going to select our default state from the properties inspector. So now, no matter which state we're on, we can add it, we can close it, and just continue that way. Really? Right? Good stuff. So, of course, now we have our one fab menu complete, and it's looking pretty good. We're pretty happy with it. We may also want to add this to all of our other screens. And it's very simple, actually. We can either go into our assets panel, and Usman is saying, what about a gradient? You can absolutely add a gradient. It's completely up to you, depends on the style of the application. In this application in specific, things are very flat. We have flat pinks, we have, aside from this area here, which is a little bit of a gradient, that's more of a placeholder, it's a lot of flat colors. So that's why I kind of went with the flat white instead of a gradient. But if your application has a lot of gradients, definitely go for it. So yeah, fancy indeed. All right, so we have our fab menu, and now we can either grab one from the assets panel, we can just drag it onto another artboard, or we can simply copy it over here. I'm going to copy the master and paste it on these other artboards. So now whichever, doesn't matter which artboard you're on, the fab menu, because it was wired up from the master component, you can do that, right? You can just paste it on all the other ones, and all that transition, all the interactions come over really nicely. Akin is saying, I also really like the previous artboard as destinations on overlay elements. Yeah, you can definitely do that. I think we covered that when we created this element over here, which was really fun. So that's just about it for today. Again, one more time, let's take a look at this. Oh, I should probably point out, you probably want to fix it into place, right? We have our navigation bar fixed, we have our header fixed, and now we can select our fab menu, and over here to the right in the properties inspector, fix position when scrolling. So now, when we're previewing, right, we can scroll down, the fab menu stays in place just like that, and I probably have to make sure the header is at the top just to keep my sanity in place. That's a bit better. So now no matter where we are in the scrolling experience, we can tap on the fab menu, it launches, and of course if you wanted to, you can actually wire up these individual icons, the text, the camera, and the live icon to other artboards or other states within that component. So if you wanted a little bit of a modal to pop up when you tap on the pencil icon, you can definitely do that. So that is going to wrap it up for me for today. A big thank you to everyone who has joined me. Uzman and Sam and Cornell and Felipe and Cornell again, Christina, Cara, everyone else, all the hundreds of people who are tuning in. I'm going to be back tomorrow with I think tomorrow's going to be a really exciting daily creative challenge, so stay tuned for that. In just a few minutes, good friend Kyle T. Webster is coming up with a draw along, always good stuff, and then Val is coming up with Logan. So stick around, and I will see you all tomorrow.